Welcome back to this week's video. This week we're talking about paint.
And all things hiring painters.
All things hiring painters. That is English perfect.
English perfect.
We're going to talk about how we chose the painter, what we learned in terms of the questions to ask, what we learned in terms of what to look out for when you're choosing the right painter, and we'll go into how much everything costs.
So by the end of this video, you should be really comfortable talking to painters that you call to bid out your job.
But if you guys want to see the finished product, because we're only at the first coat stage, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Give this video a thumbs up. In a couple of weeks, once everything's done, you guys will see more of a finished product. You want to jump inside?
Let's jump inside.
That was really seductive. Let's talk about the first question you need to have answered before you even reach out to these painters. And that is, what color paint do you want? And what type of paint do you want?
What sheen of paint do you want? So
Sheen Charles?
Every time
Charles Sheen?
Every time somebody every time we had a painter come out here, the first question they ask, are you doing matte, gloss, semi-gloss? What type of sheen are you doing on your eggshell?
Ultra shine.
These are different sheen levels of
low
your paint.
shine.
It's how much light reflects on. It's how much light reflects onto the paint. So a glossy paint will be really shiny. Light will kind of bounce off of it. Whereas a matte, it'll be really flat. And there's eggshell semi-gloss, which is common to put in bathrooms. So what are we doing in our bathrooms and what are we doing in the rest of our house?
We're doing eggshell in our bathrooms. We're not really going to be painting any portion of the kitchen. It's all going to be tiled, porcelain, or countertop. But if you were to do your kitchen, you'd probably want to go with a gloss or a high gloss. It's a lot easier to clean. And the rest of the house, we're doing a matte finish.
Yeah, we're doing matte all the way around.
And that's because it gives us a much more modern look.
And you also want to pick what color you want to paint your house. There's white, and then there's 500,000 different types of white.
Yes.
So
what you do is you go on TikTok and you find the best, most famous TikTok paint color, which in our case was
snowbound, snowblinds, something like that.
We basically said something like that to the painter, and he went ahead and picked up the paint. This behind us is just the primer first coat, but we're gonna get more into that later.
Yes, later. So after you've picked your color and your sheen of the paint, you gotta find painters. How do we find painters?
So a few methods. Yelp, if you wanna be expensive. Go follow contractors on Instagram, see who they're following and who they tag and who they work with. Reach out to those guys. Based on the quality and tier of work that those contractors are doing, you expect those prices. So if you see someone doing more affordable housing, semi-luxury, you're gonna find affordable housing painters. If you go to someone who's doing high-end builds in Pacific Palisades, the painters they use are gonna charge double what the other painters charge.
What about painters you find across the street?
So painters you find across the street is what I did. Somebody was painting a house across the street, so we went over there. I asked him to come over, but he just walked around the house. He's like, 5,000. I was like, 5,000 for the interior and the exterior? Because it sounded a little cheap to me. He's like, okay, 7,000 for interior exterior. I was like, what's exterior? He's like, everything. I'm like, okay, well, you don't need to paint new construction stucco because it's pre-tinted. Okay, 6,000. I'm like, okay, so we're just jumping prices now. It's just bing, 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 whatever hits.
It's bing, bing, bing.
Not doing that. You definitely don't want to work with those guys because they don't have experience in doing this. They don't know what it takes. They don't know what goes into the work. And honestly, if somebody's not a businessman or a tradesman that's been doing their own jobs, they're not going to do your job properly. Eddie ended up meeting with actual house painters that do new construction, and I don't know how we exactly winded down to who ended up using, but...
The number one thing is ask a lot of questions. Just in general, that's my biggest advice, is ask lots of questions, because if somebody doesn't know what they're doing, they'll start fumbling around and won't have a real answer for you. That's the best way in anything, not just paint. But as far as paint specifically, you want to ask what prep work they're doing. You want to make sure they're caulking everything, they're going to cover everything, they're going to tape everything down, and have everything ready to be painted.
Quick tip when you're asking questions, don't lead your questions to the answer that you want. So if you want to know if they're caulking the corners, don't ask them, hey, you're gonna caulk the corners, right? Better way to phrase that question is, hey, how are you gonna prep the corners? And at that point, if they go, oh, we're just gonna paint over and the paint will fill it, bing, bing, bing. But if you ask them...
Bing, bing, bing in a bad way, red flag.
Yes. But if you ask them, hey, are you gonna caulk these corners? The easy answer for them is yes. and maybe they'll start caulking it, but they won't know what they're doing. So you never want to lead the answer. You always want to ask open-ended question with giving as little information as possible and let them feed you the information so that you know that they know what they're doing.
And then the next question we asked is, how many coats are you gonna do? Because on a new construction, everybody knows if they put in one coat, that is not enough because more trades are gonna walk in, they're gonna ding up the walls. You need a second coat. So if somebody told us one coat, we knew they don't work with new construction. With that, let's jump in and see some of the work that they're doing painting our house.
Now that you guys saw the beautiful painting process going on inside, they're actually painting the primer. So why do we need the primer, Mr. Knowledge Walking Excel sheet?
Primer is really important, especially for new construction. If your drywall has nothing else on there, if you just try to paint it, the drywall is like a sponge. It'll absorb all your paint, and then you'll start using a lot more paint than you need, and that's a lot more money. That's one reason. The other reason is
the primer also provides a coat which lets you see the imperfections much more clearly. So those imperfections can get cleared and fixed and whatever, and then another layer of primer can go over it. One thing we didn't mention is the brand of paint that you could use. Now, there's a bunch of companies out there. We decided to go with Sherwin-Williams.
Sherwin-Williams. Sherwin.
Why do we pick Sherwin-Williams?
Well, because it's a nationally known brand, and that's all we saw on Instagram. We don't know much else about paint.
I'm gonna jump up there and show you guys the fascia board, which is essentially the only thing on the exterior of the house that we're painting. We're definitely gonna have to paint this again. So behind me, you guys can see the fascia board. We actually painted this black because it makes the house look much more beautifuler. The prep work that went into this is they knocked down all the nails. They filled it in with a special type of filler that is expandable. Because this wood is under the sunlight and the temperature adjustment is going to expand and contract, and therefore you want to put the right type of filler. So they went ahead, they filled everything, they sanded a bunch of things down, they cleared up the corners up here to make them nice and even until they finished the stuccoing all the exterior. Then they'll go over a second coat on this to fill in any imperfections. Aside from this on the exterior, we're going to paint the exterior walls, the block wall on the perimeter of the house. The perimeter of the house is going to be painted on later on. Because of the time frame of things. And in the garage, our painters are also going to epoxy the floors. As my magic sweeper rolls across frame, you guys can see that there's a lot of imperfections in this concrete finish that would be much more apparent once it's fully washed and clean. Now by epoxying it, we're covering that up, and we're also adding an additional layer of luxury to this house. From here, we're gonna jump inside. By we, I mean Eddie, because there's so much paint spray going on in there that I might die. And we have to sacrifice the weakest link.
You are the weakest link. Goodbye.
So I tried going inside, but they're painting exactly where we wanted to shoot. And we don't want to get paint all over the camera more than we already did. And that leads us into our final cost of painting.
So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to show you guys a finished painted interior because they're only doing the primer coat today. But we want to put out content to you guys every week. And we also want you guys to know how much this project is costing us. So let's talk about how much the paint is going to cost us once it's totally completely finished.
So the painter gave us a bid of $11,000.
And that includes?
The interior paint, the exterior fascia, and painting the wall outside. Sam tried negotiating with him. He wouldn't budge on that number.
He definitely budged.
But he did budge in the sense of Sam got him to throw in epoxying the garage floor. Besides
that is like a $10,000 job in itself.
I think like $1,000.
I think like 10 grand.
But besides that, when he came in and I told him about the accent walls, this was after everything was already decided. He wanted $500 more on the accent wall, so we are going to end up paying him $11,500 for the total paint job.
$11,500 seems like a good deal for us. We got a couple of other quotes. They were higher. A couple of them were lower in the $4,000 range, but This paint company gave us the comfort that we needed, and the fact that they'll fulfill the project the way that we want and complete it. They're doing all the coats that we want, and they're really easy to work with thus far. Once they're finished with everything, we can give you guys a more in-depth review of their work. And if you guys, once again, if you guys want references for anybody in terms of anything we've done this far, shoot us a DM on Instagram. If you guys want to see the completed paint, make sure to subscribe to this channel, hit that notification bell, thumbs up this video, and comment down below if you guys have any questions that we did not answer in this video. And we'll see you guys next week where we're going to talk about the kitchen because I think it's getting installed.
Hopefully.
Promises and commitments. We'll see you guys next week.